Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the New Deal, which was basically Franklin Delano Roosevelt's effort to deal with the Great Depression. How did we deal with the Great Depression as a country? The answer to that question is the New Deal. That's basically what happened. The New Deal consisted of a bunch of different government programs that were supposed to be um, what were called pump priming. FDR used the analogy of an old water pump. An old water pumps, if you've ever used an old water pump like at a campground or something, if they dry out, you got to put a little bit of water in before you can get water out. And that's what he said our economy was like. Our economy was this dried up water pump, and we had to put some money into it before we could get more money out of it. And so, really, all of the New Deal programs were really designed ultimately to put money into the economy, or at least most of them were designed to put money into the economy. Some great examples of that would have been things like the PWA, or the Public Works Administration. Public Works Administration, the idea was to put people back to work. It gave people jobs, and by giving people jobs, giving them a paycheck, they could go turn around and spend that money elsewhere and start the economy back up. Things that they built, things that they did, they built the Key West Causeway, connecting the Florida Keys to the mainland. They built the port of Brownsville. They built military airports. They even built 2 aircraft carriers. And so all these things were designed to, again, give people jobs, put people to work. And again, the idea was that you spend money from the government, you restart the economy, that will increase consumer spending, increase demand, and that will go ahead and lead to a better economy. Other things that we did, other things that the government did, other things that Roosevelt did, things like the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corp. The Civilian Conservation Corp, basically what it did is it employed really single males from 17 to 28 years old, so young men. It would pay them $30 a month. They didn't want to pay married men because what these guys would have to do is they'd have to go and they'd have to live in tents all across the country. And so they didn't want to be seen as splitting up families. So they really went to just single males. The Civilian Conservation Corps was run by the Army, and it would supply your food, your shelter, your clothing, all that's provided. You get paid $30 a month above that. Of that $30 a month, 25 of it had to get sent home to your family, to your mom and dad. The thought being that, hey, if a young man, 18 years old, has $30 in his pocket, he's going to blow it on stuff like unnecessary stuff, alcohol, whatever. If you send it back home, mom's going to go ahead and buy clothes for the kids, put food on the table, and she's going to go ahead and buy things that are practical, that support vital industries to our economy. And so the idea was that, okay, we'll give you $5 to blow on whatever you want. 25 goes back home to mom and dad. Things they would have them do, they'd have them plant trees, so reforestation projects. They'd have them build roads. They'd have them dig ditches. And they'd basically work anywhere that the government needed them to do these types of conservation projects. The Federal Emergency Relief Act then is a little bit different, where the Civilian Conservation Corps gives people jobs along with the PWA. The Federal Emergency Relief Act, it really provides direct aid to people. $250 million in direct aid. They give it out to the states with the idea that the states would turn around and give people checks. And so this was really the first example of the government really stepping in to give people money to help alleviate some of the conditions on some of the poverty caused by the Great Depression. It was headed up by one of FDR's most trusted advisors. In fact, he's part of what's called the Brain Trust, a group of trusted advisors that were close to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And arguably no one was closer than Harry Hopkins. Harry Hopkins ends up heading up the Civilian Works Administration, which is part of the Federal Emergency Relief Act. The CWA was, again, intended to try to give people a job. But the jobs the CWA gave weren't like the PWA or the CCC, where the CCC, the PWA, these were jobs that needed to be done. They were public improvements. A lot of times the Civil Works Administration, anything that they could come up with, and they even came up with a name for it called a boondoggle. It was work that didn't have to be done. It was unnecessary. But nonetheless, they felt like it was better to go ahead and pay somebody for doing something, even if it was not necessary to do, than doing nothing at all. And so, again, really, even though it provided a job, the jobs weren't really jobs that needed to be done. They were jobs that were really intended to get money into the hands of the people. Another program, New Deal program, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, paid farmers not to work, really, which is strange. You're paying people to work in the CWA with work that doesn't need to be done. And here you're taking farmers and you're paying them not to produce. What had happened with the farmers was we had become so efficient, we could produce more food than we needed. And that drove the cost of food down. And so farmers couldn't make ends meet. They couldn't make money. And so what we had to do is decrease supply. And so we paid farmers not to produce. We paid farmers, in fact, to destroy crops. This was controversial. Again, here we are in the midst of the Great Depression. People are starving, and our government is paying farmers to destroy food. What this caused was higher food prices. Now, you might ask, well, how did the government pay for this? Well, they taxed food producers. So now, not only do you have a lower supply of food causing the price of food to go up, now you're taxing the food processors, people like Kraft and Bisco, stuff like that. And of course, they're going to pay that tax out of the goodness of their heart? No, they're going to pass that cost on to the consumer, reflected in the price of their goods. So again, the Agricultural Adjustment Act increasing the price of food on multiple levels, on multiple fronts. So this was an example of kind of regulation. The TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, another example of a New Deal program. The Tennessee Valley Authority was intended to go ahead and provide economic relief to one of the most impoverished parts of our nation. The Tennessee Valley is a river that runs through Tennessee and mostly Alabama. And what happened was, this area, very impoverished, they basically built a series of dams along the Tennessee Valley, the Tennessee River through the Tennessee Valley. Actually, most of them were really not in Tennessee. They were really in Alabama. And what this does, it creates a series of lakes. This is supposed to help in a couple of different ways. One, the Tennessee River was notorious for flooding every spring and then drying up by fall. And so what they would do is in these dams, they would save that flood water and just release it slowly throughout the year so that the Tennessee River had a steady flow throughout the year. This makes the Tennessee River navigable. You can go up and down the Tennessee River because of that system of dams. And so the idea was, hopefully would improve commerce and allow trade back and forth up and down the river. It also has the other fringe benefit of providing electric power to Tennessee, to the Tennessee Valley, Alabama and Tennessee. And so this goes ahead, and the thought was would encourage development because now companies had a means to power their manufacturing facilities along the Tennessee River because of the electricity supply. Tennessee Valley Authority, one of the most long-lasting of all of the New Deal programs. You can still go and see those dams along the Tennessee River today, and they are still producing power till this day. The Homeowners Loan Corporation was another example of aid that was more direct. This is, again, a holdover from the Hoover administration. Hoover comes up with this idea first, but the idea was to prevent foreclosures. It lasts all the way till 1936, and by the time it's all said and done, the federal government gives out enough money or enough low-interest loans that they save approximately, we estimate, 1 million homes across the country. Probably one of FDR's most controversial pieces of legislation was the National Industrial Recovery Act. It creates an organization called the NRA, the National Recovery Administration, not the National Rifle Association, for those of you who might be so politically inclined. The symbol of the NRA was the Blue Eagle, and here, basically what they did was they said, look, you didn't have to be part of the NRA, but if you were a business, you could join up with the NRA, and you would agree to certain conditions. You would agree to price controls. You would agree to a minimum wage. You would agree to no child labor. You would agree to a 40-hour work week. You would agree to give your workers the right to unionize. And you would agree not to charge less than what it costs you to produce your product. That's called cutthroat competition. And that drove the price of products down to the point where businesses couldn't make money. The competition was so fierce. And so what you would get, once you agreed to these codes of fair competition, you would get a Blue Eagle to put in your window saying that you were helping to fight the Great Depression. So it was almost supposed to be like a marketing thing. Where it would help you sell your products because people would know to support your business because you were doing your part to end the Great Depression. Why would they do some of these things? Why establish a minimum wage? You establish a minimum wage, and that's going to go ahead and mean that you can employ fewer people because you can't pay them as much. But you provide a wage in which somebody could go ahead and support potentially a family on it. Why do you want child labor gone? Well, again, who's going to make more money, the child or the adult worker? Well, the adult worker. And again, you wanted workers who could support their family. So you're discouraging businesses from using children because you want the adults to be employed. Why the 40-hour work week? Again, similar idea. Basically, once you work over 40 hours, they said you had to pay overtime. And the idea here was, so you don't want people working more to get overtime? No, you want them to hire another person because the other person's cheaper, so you get more people jobs. That was the idea behind a lot of that regulation in the NIRA. All right, why don't you go ahead and take just a minute, ask yourself a few questions, and see if you can answer them from the notes.